Hello, and welcome to the HOME-ARP IDIS e-tutorials designed for HOME-ARP participating jurisdictions, or PJs. This tutorial will provide PJs with an introduction to HOME-ARP operating and capacity building activities. It will also teach PJs how to set up, fund, draw, and complete activities in IDIS. First, let's start by discussing some basic background information on nonprofit operating assistance and capacity building. HOME-ARP Operating Expense Assistance is for the costs of operating the nonprofit organization. These costs may include employee salaries, wages, and other employee compensation and benefits. For a complete list of eligible costs for HOME-ARP Operating Expense Assistance, please see the HOME-ARP notice. Capacity building assistance is for general operating costs that will result in the expansion or improvement of an organization's ability to successfully carry out eligible HOME-ARP activities. Examples may include employee training or upgrades to materials or equipment. For a complete list of eligible costs for capacity building assistance, please see the HOME-ARP notice. A PJ may provide up to 5% of its allocation to nonprofit organizations for eligible operating expenses. It may also provide up to an additional 5% of its allocation to nonprofits for capacity building. There are a few key limitations to the use of HOME-ARP funds when assisting nonprofit organizations with operating and capacity building expenses. The amount of assistance a nonprofit organization may receive is limited based on the type of assistance it is receiving and the organization's general operating expenses for that fiscal year. For more detailed information on limits to assistance, PJs should see the HOME-ARP notice. Additional guidance can also be found in the FAQs on HUD.gov under Nonprofit Operating and Capacity Building Assistance Program Requirements. Within IDIS, HUD has established specific fund types for operating expense assistance and capacity building assistance. CO is the fund type used for operating assistance, while CB is used for capacity building. Note that the fund type for HOME-ARP nonprofit operating expense assistance is not the same as CHOTO operating for HOME, though both are abbreviated as CO in IDIS. As an example of how to use these fund types, let's say a PJ has executed 2 written agreements with a nonprofit organization that will be carrying out a HOME-ARP activity in the near future. One written agreement is for $50,000 to pay for general operating expenses of the nonprofit organization, including employee salaries and benefits, rent, and utilities. The other agreement is for $25,000 to pay for eligible costs related to developing the capacity of the nonprofit organization, including training for new staff. The PJ may set up 2 separate activities in IDIS, one activity for each agreement. As a reminder, the PJ should not set up an activity in IDIS until the written agreement is executed. Each activity must be funded with the appropriate fund type: CO, Nonprofit Operating, for the operating assistance activity, and CB, Nonprofit Capacity Building, for the capacity building activity. First, the PJ will need to set up the CO and CB subfunds. Each type of HOME-ARP subfund can only be set up once, so if there are existing CO and CB subfunds set up for the HOME-ARP grant, the PJ should move on to the creation of a subgrant described in the next section. In this example, the PJ has not yet set up its CO or CB subfund. We'll start with setting up the CO subfund by selecting Add under the left-hand Subfund menu under the Grant tab. Enter the subfund search criteria. Select Home under Program, Grant Year 2021, and Fund Type CO. Search, then locate the CO fund type for the HOME-ARP grant that is noted with a blue ribbon. Click Add Fund Type. On the Add Subfund screen, enter the authorized amount for this subfund, which will be capped at 5% of the HOME-ARP grant. The PJ should enter the amount they plan to use for nonprofit operating assistance. A good reference point for this could be the total amount designated for nonprofit operating assistance in the Use of HOME-ARP funding table in the PJ's HOME-ARP allocation plan. Now save, and look for confirmation that the subfund was successfully created. The subgrant can only be set up after the subfund is created. As a reminder, a subgrant is a subset of a subfund and is used to set aside funds for a specific recipient. Under the Subgrant menu, click Add. Search for the appropriate HOME-ARP grant using the grant number. The HOME-ARP grant number has a star next to it. Select Fund Type CO, then select Organization. Search for the nonprofit organization that will receive the operating funds. Click the radio button, then select. If the organization is not in IDIS, add the nonprofit organization by clicking the gray Add Organization button at the top of the page, entering the organization's information, and save. Enter the CO subgrant authorized amount. This amount must match the amount specified in the written agreement with the nonprofit. Finally, select Save. Let's look at how HOME-ARP operating and capacity building activities should be set up and funded in IDIS. Begin by adding a new activity under the left-hand Activity menu. Associate the activity with a 2021 project, which can be an existing 2021 home project, a single HOME-ARP project for all HOME-ARP activities, or a HOME-ARP project specifically set up by the PJ for only CO activities. Remember that if the PJ adds HOME-ARP specific projects to the 2021 Annual Action Plan, it is required to complete an amendment to its plan. Select the HOME-ARP checkbox, and from the drop-down menu, the activity type AD/CO CB. Please note, the PJ is allowed to have multiple separate administration, operating, and capacity building activities. Fill out the Section 3 and Environmental Review fields and select Save. Once the activity has been successfully set up, it can then be funded. Return to the Edit Activity page and select the Activity Funding button. Select Add Edit for HOME-ARP CO under Available Funds for the correct recipient organization. If the PJ has multiple subgrants of the same fund type, make sure to look at the recipient organization names. HOME-ARP fund types will have a blue ribbon indicator next to them. Click I agree, continue to add edit funding details to agree with the Home Activity Funding Certification Statement. Enter the funded amount and save. Note that the date that funding is first added for an activity in IDIS appears at the top of the Activity Setup page as the initial funding date. This initial funding date must not be before the date of the executed written agreement with the nonprofit. For a nonprofit capacity building activity, the PJ would follow the exact same process by creating a single HOME-ARP CB Subfund, creating a CB Subgrant for the nonprofit organization, and then funding the activity using the CB fund type. Once the activity has been funded and eligible expenses have been incurred by the nonprofit organization, the PJ can draw funds for this activity from IDIS. In this example, the nonprofit has invoiced the PJ for eligible operating expenses, such as employee salaries in the amount of $8,500. Since the organization has incurred eligible expenses and invoiced the PJ can create a drawdown voucher in IDIS. The PJ should only create a drawdown voucher for the amount invoiced. Remember, once HOME-ARP funds are drawn, they must be expended for an eligible HOME-ARP cost within 15 days. When creating a voucher for the CO activity, the PJ should be careful to select the designated nonprofit organization in the Voucher Created For drop-down menu. Like all other vouchers in IDIS, this voucher must be approved by another IDIS user. Once the PJ has drawn down all the funds for its CO or CB activity, or there are no more eligible costs to pay, the PJ should complete the activity. Note that the PJ is not required to draw the total amount committed to this activity in order to complete it. Completing the activity will uncommit any undispersed funds, and the PJ should reduce any remaining funding in the appropriate subgrant for the nonprofit organization. The PJ may subgrant these funds to a different nonprofit or reduce the associated subfund to return these unused funds to entitlement, or EN. To complete its nonprofit operating activity, the PJ should select Check Home on the Edit Activity screen. After clicking the Check Home button, if the message shows the home activity pathway is complete, the PJ may proceed to complete the activity. Under Activity Status, select Complete and enter the activity completion date. For additional information on nonprofit operating and capacity building, see the HOME-ARP notice, including Section 6F, the HOME-ARP fact sheet, IDIS for nonprofit operating and nonprofit capacity building activities, Chapters 16 and 17 of the Home IDIS Training Manual for PJs, and HOME-ARP FAQs on HUD.gov. PJs also can use the HUD Exchange Ask a Question portal. For questions about specific IDIS technical issues, select IDIS on the second page of the form. Questions about HOME-ARP can also be sent to HOME-ARP@HUD.gov.